This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, X-Zone Nation. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. And our main website, the radio show website, where you can listen to the X-Zone live Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight. And for the rest of the time, you can listen to past shows that we play throughout the day at www.xzoneradiotv.com. We're going to be talking about the UFO Dossier this hour. It's a new book out by Kevin Randle. The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover Ups. Does the U.S. government know more about UFOs and alien life form than it admits? Are eyewitnesses telling the truth? What does the historical record say? Well, scrutinizing the evidence, former intelligence officer and retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Kevin D. Randle takes an objective look at the possibilities of alien life and UFOs found in government files and presents his findings in the UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover-Ups. Exposing plots, cover-ups, misleading statements, and documented connections to government intrigue, as well as hoaxes and problematic authentications, Kevin pursues the facts wherever they lead, following clues and digging into files of the CIA, the FBI, the FAA, NASA, and Army, Navy, Air Force, and other governmental and international agencies. The UFO Dossier investigates a wide variety of mysteries, including the Condon Committee, asteroids, meteors, and possible UFOs, including Tunguska and the Whitehead sighting, photographic evidence from McMinnville. That's just one of the many cases that Kevin looks into. Injuries caused by UFOs, including burns and temporary paralysis. Lights in the night sky in Lubbock, New Jersey, Belgium, and more. Scientific evidence and interpretations of UFO findings, and much more. Kevin Randle is a good friend of the X-Zone. It's always great to have him on. And Kevin, congratulations on your new book, The UFO Dossier.
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that.
How's it going, my friend? How's the family? Everybody well? Doing well, I hope?
Everything's going fine. The weather's been beautiful here in Iowa. And we know that they've had cold weathers coming from Canada, but it'll be held off for a while.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that, pal. I'll see if the gods up in the north can do something about that and make sure that you, especially in Iowa, get warm weather for the rest of the season and so
Millennium?
on. Yeah. Kevin, first of all, I want to thank you for sending us a copy of your book, The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover-Ups. Once again, Kevin, you've outdone yourself. You've presented the facts. You've presented it in a way that you're raising a lot of questions as well as answering a lot of questions.
Well, I think the important thing in UFO research is to go where the facts take you. And too often we get involved in these debates with the skeptics, or the believers get involved with the skeptics, and they're arguing with facts that are cherry-picked to prove their point of view. And I've always thought of this as more of an investigation. I'm not interested in proving a point. I'm interested in finding out what the facts are and how we can get from point A to point B. So that's kind of the things I've brought to this, and unfortunately there are people who become annoyed with that attitude. They just want me to validate their specific sightings, no matter how bad those sightings are or how poor the evidence is. They just want validation. They don't want to know what the truth is.
This book, Exonation, is over 407 pages. It's filled with photos, stories, facts. Hey, Christmas is just around the corner, and this would be an ideal Christmas gift. Hey, Kevin, this is the first Christmas book we've plugged this year.
and it's only September.
Well, you know what? I used to think that too. But 3 weeks ago, my wife Laura and I went to Costco. I love the meat there, and this is not a paid endorsement for Costco. I just love the meat. Plus, where else can you go and get a quarter-pound hot dog with all the pop you can drink for, what is it, 99 cents or something ridiculous like that? Anyway, they had their Christmas display up.
There are many stores that have their Christmas displays up. And my wife came home the other day and said, they've already got the Christmas displays up and we haven't even had Halloween yet.
I know. You see, Halloween used to be the transitional point where retailers would start putting up their Christmas stuff. But now
I thought it was Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Well, up here in the north, where the weather's cold, that we send down to the States, it was Halloween.
Well, your Thanksgiving isn't that far after Halloween. Ours is a little bit further beyond it.
Well, the way I've seen my mother cook turkeys, Halloween and Thanksgiving must have been on the same date many a times. My mother used to, this is the God's truth. For Halloween supper, my mother, God bless her, she's a wonderful lady, and thank the good Lord her and my dad are still with us. She would dye our potatoes black.
Oh, yum.
Because we were having coconut squash, which is orange, and the potatoes. You know, she thought she was making a Halloween plate for us.
All right.
And yes, you're right. On St. Patrick's Day, we had green mashed potatoes.
And how about St. Joseph's Day? Did you have red potatoes?
Actually, we were Catholics, so we didn't go for the saints.
Well, you just said St. Patrick. I mean,
well, of course, everybody's Irish.
Okay.
Well, wait a minute. You know what? You're right. St. Valentine's Day was red potatoes.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So tell me, Kevin, tell me about your new book. What was the inspiration behind it?
It is sort of a follow-on for the government files, government UFO files, and that delved into the investigations that took place in the United States, the documentation from the United States, and that sort of thing. And so the UFO Dossier was a logical extension of that, looking at what other countries around the world have done in their investigations of UFOs. And one of the questions that's always been asked is, how is it that if UFOs are real and a worldwide phenomenon, the United States is able to control the information? Why don't the Canadians or the British or the Australians or the Chinese or the Japanese, why don't they come out with their own reports and say, you know, these things are real? Which, of course, has been done to some extent. But I wanted to look at it from a worldwide phenomenon. And one of the answers is an awful lot of the time, the official agencies in the various countries would contact our Air Force to find out what they knew about UFOs, the assumption being we knew more about it because of the investigation that began in 1947 than some of these other countries. And the U.S. Air Force actually lied about what was going on. So they believed that what the Air Force is saying, and the best example is the Australians, who in the 1950s, one of their scientists had done a report about UFOs, and he quoted extensively from Donald Kehoe's books about UFOs, used this as the source. And the Royal Australian Air Force wrote to the U.S. Air Force and said, what about this Kehoe guy? And they said, he just makes the stuff up. There's nothing to it. He doesn't have any of these sources. He's just completely wrong. And the Australian Air Force says, okay. And then they kind of went off on a tangent because of that. In today's world, we now find out that Kehoe was actually right more often than not, and the information that he was publishing in his books was based on official documentations and official sources on the inside. And the Air Force just kind of blew off the Australians by saying, "Now you don't have to listen to what he has to say." So that's kind of an example of how the investigation's been throttled by our government, the U.S. Air Force, in an attempt to keep some of this stuff under wraps.
Why would they keep it under wraps, Kevin?
You know, this is the question I just cannot fathom in today's world. I get it. In the 1940s, I understand that as this phenomenon exploded, that our government, the United States government, didn't want to admit that they didn't have an answer. They're suddenly presented with this phenomenon that can violate our airspace, and we're powerless to stop it. We're powerless to do anything about it. And I think Roswell figures into this a little bit as well. But they just don't have the answers. We've just come out of World War II. People are very scared about these sorts of things, and their best course of action is to try to suppress the information. And we actually have that documentation.
Right.
There was a story in the newspapers on July 9th, 1947 that said the Army and Navy moved today to stop stories of flying saucers whizzing through the atmosphere. And the reason was this allowed them to investigate it in an environment that wasn't quite as hostile or quite of anxiety-ridden as it could have been. By suppressing the information, they could carry out their investigations. Once we've gotten beyond that, once we've realized that the flying saucers probably aren't hostile, the invasion fleet isn't standing off Earth, and as a science fiction writer, I've often thought, what would be the purpose of invading Earth? Because any of the resources we have on Earth could be mined far away from the Earth in either the asteroid belt or the Oort cloud or the Kuiper belt. All the minerals and the water and everything you could want is available way away from the sun that reduces the problems of getting here, but that's a whole other argument. The interest, of course, would be here is another intelligent race creating a civilization. But once we've got beyond that, once we realize that the invasion fleet isn't out there and ready to land, I don't understand why we've continued to suppress the information other than we've always done it that way. There is no pressing need to reveal it, I suppose, which is one of the reasons. And they've managed to manipulate everything, the media, the people, the society, everything, into kind of looking askance at people who talk about flying saucers. Scientists don't want to talk about it because it can affect their careers. We know pilots have lost their flying jobs when they've reported UFOs. So there's this attempt to suppress the information, and that can be demonstrated. But I do not understand why it persists today, because if the government came out tomorrow and said, flying saucers are from other worlds, I cannot understand what the effect would be on the Earth. We are prepared for that now. We weren't prepared in 1947, but in today's environment, we're prepared for it.
How are we prepared, Kevin?
Because we've talked about this for 50 years.
Okay.
We've looked at we've got all these Hollywood productions or worldwide productions about the benevolent space people, whomever they might be. We've talked about Star Trek. We've talked about all of this sort of thing, and it's not something that would become a great surprise to us like it would have been 50 or 60 years ago. We're much more sophisticated. We understand these things much better. And the other thing is we're separated from the beginning of the phenomenon by half a century. We can say, well, gee whiz, this has been going on for 50 years and it has not affected me at all. Why should I suddenly panic?
Do you think the governments of the world have contingency plans in case there is, in fact, an alien invasion?
If there are, I would think it would be more of a just for strategic planning purposes and the creation of an interesting exercise for the military organizations, the governmental organizations to participate in. Here is the scenario. The aliens have landed. Here's what they're doing. How do we respond? And it's not unlike, and this is the thing out of World War II, that prior to Pearl Harbor, all of the exercises they created to practice this sort of thing started with Orange, which was code for the Japanese, bombing Pearl Harbor. And that's how they launched their exercises in planning for these sorts of things, which is kind of ironic since that's exactly what happened. And they didn't seem prepared for it at all. But you know, if they've done something like that, I would suspect it would be more of, here's an interesting scenario. How do we cope with these bizarre situations? And I know as when I was still in the National Guard, we practiced a lot of different things, including pandemics. What happens if there's an outbreak of disease? Here's the disease. What are you going to do to keep it from spreading, and that sort of thing. And so I would guess that it would be an exercise that would be fun to participate in, but it's not really planning for an alien invasion.
Tell me about the Condon Committee and the complete COMETA report.
Well, the Condon Committee was the Air Force's attempt to get out from investigating UFOs. And in fact, there's actually documentation to prove that. There was a letter from an Air Force officer named Hippler to the Condon Committee and said, you know, here's our opportunity. If we cannot end this thing now, we're going to be stuck with it for another 20 years. And the Condon Committee wrote back and said, okay, we got it. You know, they wanted to say some positive things about the Air Force investigation, say that it doesn't affect national security, and that there's nothing of scientific value that can be learned from further study of UFO reports. And that's exactly what the Condon Committee did. Condon, in fact, was in Corning, New York, I think 18 months before the report was supposed to be finished, and said, as, in essence, you know, I'm right now I'm ready to tell the Air Force to stop this nonsense, but I'm not supposed to come to that conclusion for another 18 months. So the documentation is out there, and the whole point of the Condon Committee was to get the Air Force off the hook that it thought it was on, which they did. They said exactly what the Air Force asked them to do. There is no national security impact of UFO reports. The one thing that stunned me about this is one of the sightings they was explained as a natural phenomenon so rare it had never been seen before or since. And I'm thinking, this suggests to me that there's something of scientific value to be studied, because here's a natural phenomenon that deserves some attention. But their conclusion was, no, we don't need to do this anymore. And the Air Force closed down Project Blue Book, which was their public investigation. Right. But we have since learned there was a classified investigation that was going on. Started in December of 1957, called Project Moondust, and the name was changed in 1985, is what I'm attempting to say here. When the name was compromised, it was a classified name, and the State Department actually released documents that talked about Moondust. What is really ironic about that is now the Air Force released their Project Blue Book files in 1976, 10 years before this happened. And while I was doing UFO government files, I was looking for a case, and as I was scanning through the Project Blue Book microfilm, I thought I saw the term Moondust go by, and I went back and looked, and I found 4 cases in the Project Blue Book files actually marked Project Moondust. So we had the answer like 10 years before the State Department inadvertently compromised the name. But once that happened, the point is, a number of researchers asked, well, what's the new name for it? And the response was, it's properly classified. We don't have to tell you it's properly classified. So we know that there was a project that continued beyond the end of Blue Book, and we know that what the name of the project was Moondust, and that it's gone beyond 1985. So that stuff is still going on.
You were talking about a case that they said was a natural phenomenon that had never happened before and had never happened since. Well, if it was a natural phenomenon that never happened before, how did they know that time was a natural phenomenon as well?
That's exactly what I asked. Yeah. How would you know that?
That's right.
And it's a very intriguing case from Labrador in the mid-1950s. Very interesting case about that, where they saw the object and paced the aircraft and that sort of thing. So they got it from very good sources. I mean, it was their own guys seeing the object. But how do you draw that conclusion based on the documentation? The other thing the Condon Committee did, there was, of course, the wonderful Shag Harbor site in Canada, which the Condon Committee made a phone call and got the information. Well, there's a couple of teenagers who saw the thing, so we don't need to investigate it. never realizing, of course, yes, there were some teenagers involved, as there were some constables, as there were some Mounties, as there were a lot of other people involved. Not to mention a photograph of the damn thing taken, and all of this nice information. But they're during their investigation. But there's just a bunch of teenagers. We don't have to go to Canada to investigate it. And I would have relished the idea, a chance to go to Canada.
Sure, but
it's a very nice place.
When it's not cold.
It's not cold.
But what about the responsibility of the Canadian government to take care of its own business? Could this have been seen like the American government saying, well, geez, it's just a couple of teenagers. We really don't need to overstep our authorities and go into Canada. If it's anything important, the Canadians will let us know about it.
I think the idea would have been, if the Condon Committee, we've got this wonderful sighting in Shag Harbor with lots of various chains of evidence that we should go look at, and I don't see how that would, we could coordinate with the Canadian government to make the investigation in the name of the United States Air Force. We're an investigative body for the United States Air Force at this point, and if that doesn't work, you can say, well, the United States Air Force would like to be involved in this, and in fact, the American military organizations were involved in some of the things that went on at Shag Harbor, as Don Ledger and Chris Stiles have learned through the documentation they were able to recover. So here was an opportunity to study something that would have provided them with multiple chains of evidence that might have suggested something to them other than, well, here's another strange natural phenomena going on in Shag Harbor.
That's what eating too much lobster will do to you.
I did not know that.
Oh, there you go. The Tunguska. There are those who believe it was an alien crash. There are those who believe it was a comet. There are those who believe it was a Tesla experiment. Where did your evidence take you on this one, Kevin?
I'm thinking, although it's a fascinating case, I'm thinking it's probably the natural phenomena, either an asteroid or a comet that detonated, I think it was like 5 miles high at the time, in 1908, based on the eyewitness testimony, based on the scientific investigations we've made there. I actually talked to James Van Allen about this in, I think, 1976. Van Allen taught at the University of Iowa, and I had a friend at the time, Bob Cornett, who told me that he knew Van Allen.
Well, isn't he the gentleman to whom the Van Allen belt is named after?
In the University of Iowa, those are called the radiation belts, not
yes.
the Van Allen belts.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
But yes, that's the very guy.
Yep.
That's the very guy. So, I mean, here's an incredible physicist.
Incredible, yes.
And he's at the University of Iowa, and my friend Bob Cornett said, well, I know Van Allen. I'm thinking, yeah, sure you do, and so do I. And we're in the physics building. We're in the physics building in the elevator, and the elevator opens, and Van Allen gets on the elevator. And Van Allen looks at him and says, hi, Bob. And Bob says, hi, Van. So he actually did know him. Bob had originally gone to the University of Iowa to study physics, so he knew Van Allen. And so we were able to get an interview with him. And that was one of the things I asked him. What about Tunguska? What do you think about Tunguska? And it was his opinion at the time, and he'd looked at this. So I thought that was kind of amazing, that it was probably a cometary or an asteroid that blew up. And he mentioned a number of the expeditions gone there. There was no crater found, but when these things detonate in the air, it's based on the kinetic energy and the resistance of the atmosphere causing them to explode. It was like an atomic bomb had gone off. And once we were doing experiments with atomic weapons, the way the trees were flattened and all that looked exactly like what you would get if you detonated an atomic bomb, 5 miles above the Earth. And so that probably is a natural phenomenon, but there's still that just little core of, yeah, but, and I said, well, could it have been an atomic engine that exploded? And he said, that's a very difficult thing to do, to get what he called a high-grade explosion. Mostly, if you have an atomic power plant, a nuclear power plant, go critical, normally what you would get was some kind of a low-grade fizzle, which would spread irradiation all over the place, but you wouldn't get a high-energy detonation. And so he didn't think that was a plausible explanation for it, because it wouldn't blow up that way. He was thinking more of a natural phenomenon, and I kind of lean that direction. But there's information in the UFO dossier about others and Russian scientists who were involved in the investigations who thought, yeah, we're not really sure that it was a natural phenomenon. It may have been something else going on. So, I kind of look at it both ways. I lean toward it being a natural explosion and not alien in nature, but I try to present the evidence. Here's the evidence for the alien nature of it.
In your book, you also have photographic evidence, and one of the stories that you discuss is McMinnville.
Yes, those are two photographs that were taken in 1950 of a disc-shaped object with some kind of a bizarre antenna structure on top of it. And it was taken by farmer Paul Trent and his wife, not very sophisticated people, using a little, I think, a brownie box camera, where you have to twist the film to advance it and that sort of thing. And they took these two photographs and didn't think much of them. Didn't go to the drugstore to get the film developed until 4 or 5 weeks after this happened, because there were still a couple of frames left on the film. And in today's environment, everybody's saying, well, why wouldn't you run out immediately to see if the pictures came out? And the answer is, this was 1950. And film was expensive, and developing was expensive, and you're going to throw away that much film on a flying saucer picture. Even though I think, if I'd taken the pictures, I'd have been trying to get the things developed immediately. But there's been a lot of analysis of that by various people. I know that the Condon Committee looked at them and they said, well, we don't have an explanation for these photographs. Phil Klass, the great UFO debunker, and sort of his photographic expert. Robert Schaefer, and I say sort of his photographic expert because Schaefer is kind of a UFO investigator as well, but he's on the other side of the fence from me. Looked at it and they said, well, the pictures were taken in a different order than the Trent said they were, which means they were taken not in the evening but in the morning. And if they lied about that, what else have they lied about? And it was all based on the shadows underneath the eaves on the garage, and they said, well, it couldn't, the shadow is distinct enough. The sun had to be in this position rather than in this position. Bruce Maccabee looked at the picture and says, no, it's random light scattering. You'd get that sort of thing. It's not that big a deal. There were clouds in the area to scatter the light around and that sort of thing. So the skeptics have come up with an explanation that it's a hoax, which is their fallback position. If they can't explain it, then it must be a hoax, because we know there's no alien visitation. But it's a couple of the best photographs that we have, given the people who took them. The clarity of the pictures is not a fuzzy ball of light. It's a distinct object that you can see. That I think that the estimate is it's 30 feet in diameter. And it's clearly no sort of experimental craft that we would be testing in 1950. In today's world, you might see something being tested would give you that kind of an impression, but in 1950, certainly not. So you've got these two wonderful photographs that there's really only two explanations. They're either a hoax or they show an alien spacecraft. There's no other explanation for them. That's just the way it is. And in this case, I believe that what we're looking at is legitimate photograph of an extraterrestrial object, and the skeptics, the debunkers, will say, no, it's a hoax because there is no alien visitation.
One of the major things that I find within the UFO community, Kevin, and I've said this to you before, that too much of it is in gray area. Instead of being black or white, I would say the majority of it is in the gray area. And when you're looking for the truth, if you're looking for proof, you look for that black or white. White, it's not real. Black, it is. So where do you think that the majority of UFO evidence is? Now, you've been investigating this for several years. You're an acclaimed investigator. You've got credibility. You've got respect. You're a well-known author and speaker. So when you look at the entire UFO scenario, what do you think? Is it real?
I think the evidence is persuasive that what we're looking at is an alien spacecraft. And when you say there's a lot of gray in it, I think part of the problem is what we have to deal with are the skeptics, the debunkers, because they know there is no alien visitation, they're always throwing an awful lot of mud on the wall to see what sticks. And oftentimes, that's what happens. It sticks. On the other hand, there are any number of UFO investigators, UFO proponents, UFO believers, who will accept everything as being true and don't do a good case. And when the case blows up in their face, and the best recent example of the Roswell slides, it really damages all UFO research, because here was an event where if they had done the proper research, if they had looked at everything carefully, they would have had an answer, and that we wouldn't have been caught up in this idea that these slides are of an alien creature who was killed in Roswell. But that makes us all look bad, and everybody remembers those sorts of things. And as I've said before, the one thing everybody knows about Bill Buckner was the ball went between his feet, and the Red Sox lost the series. They don't remember all the great stuff he did.
They just remember
that's
that oops.
Remember.
Yeah. Kevin's,
and that's where we are here.
Kevin, stand by, my friend. You and I have to take a short break. Exonation, Kevin Randle is our very special guest. He's got a brand new book out. I've had the opportunity of going through it. It's a great book. The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover Ups. And it's by the good people at Invisible Ink Press. You can get Kevin's book at Amazon.com. And Kevin, let our listeners know what your blog spot is.
You can read a lot of stuff on my blog, which is kevinrandle.blogspot.com, or just type in a different perspective, and it usually comes up. And a lot of the cases you would look at, like the Roswell slides, if you type Roswell slides in there, you'll link to my site in 2 or 3 on Google, 2 or 3 down. If it's not the top one, it's 2 or 3 down, and you can find it that way as well.
Kevin, stand by. We've got to take a short break. We'll both be back on the other side as we continue talking about Kevin Randle's new book, The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover-Ups, here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. X Zone Nation, www.xzonetv.com. We have one of the first of the complete episodes that we are making available to you, the members of the X Zone Nation and the public, at www.xzonetv.com. It's my interview with Jose Escamilla. We were talking about rods, we were talking about UFOs and moon bases. Take a look. Watching is free. It's the complete episode at xzonetv.com. My name's Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone. Kevin Randle and I return after this break. Don't go away. What if Jesus came back now and insisted that we listen to him? How would the world be different if Christians really followed the Gospels? For 2,000 years, we've been practicing a religion. Now it's finally time to get it right. Read Liberating Jesus, new from Roberta Grimes. Meet the Jesus you never knew. Roberta uses afterlife evidence and biblical analysis to prove that Jesus is exactly right. Learning the lessons that he came to teach is the reason we are born at all. Roberta says he has come back now to insist that we actually listen to him so we can begin to use his teachings to unite and transform the world. Liberating Jesus on Amazon, October 1st, and then wherever books are sold. Jesus Good real estate websites are not just about showing listings, but offering visitors valuable information about neighborhoods, market statistics, tips, and personal insights. Luckily, you will find that on Roost, but you won't on many other real estate websites in Budapest. That's why we created Roost. Roost is a website with tailored results for the foreign investor, curated by Hungarian-loving expats who found their home abroad and decided to roost in Budapest. Let Roost help you get started on the right foot. Whether you intend to live, work, play, retire, or simply invest abroad, Roost offers all types of properties in Budapest, from affordable studios to luxury homes. From neighborhood insights like where to grab a great coffee or how to buy property, our team of local experts can answer your questions and speak to the direct concerns of a foreign investor. Buying foreign property is an exciting and complex adventure. It can also be very time-consuming and costly if you don't have the best information and resources at hand. Roost provides professional real estate services and assistance to an international clientele of foreign property investors and rental apartment owners in Budapest. For more information on Roost, visit their website at www.roost.co. That's www.rooste.co.
The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com.
Welcome back, everyone. Kevin Randle is our special guest. kevinrandle.blogspot.com is his website. He's got a great new book out. All his books are really great, but don't tell him I said that. The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover Ups. And Kevin, always great having you with us, my friend. You still there, Kevin?
Thank you very much.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe you were abducted by aliens over the break.
No, I have guns.
Kevin, I was speaking earlier today to a guest who's written a book. His name is Michael Nardo, and he's written a book called The Beginning. And we were talking about many of the things that you and I have talked about over the years. And he brought up the Phoenix Lights. Now, what's your take on the Phoenix Lights?
That's a very complex set of sightings,
because
some of them are explained by natural phenomena by actually the Air Force. The Maryland National Guard, Air Guard, was training in the Phoenix area, and some of the lights that you see are flares dropped by them, and that's demonstratable. The evidence is overwhelming for that.
Right.
On the other hand, there are a number of sightings that are simply not explained by that. And there was a sighting of a triangular-shaped object that I think, if I remember correctly, went from Tucson, Arizona, up toward the Phoenix area and then off toward the west. That was seen by literally hundreds of people, and that sighting is not explained. So there were some very interesting sightings involved there, and there were some other sightings that were explainable by natural phenomena. That's not unlike the Lubbock Lights, which we have those marvelous pictures taken by Carl Hart Jr. of the lights as they flew over Lubbock in 1952. But some of the sightings are explained by birds. The plover, I think is the name of the bird, flying around the area. But when you get to the photographs, plover don't explain this, because plover do not fly in a V-shaped formation, and these lights are clearly in a V-shaped formation. And there's some other sightings that took place prior to the Lubbock Lights, the first night that they were seen, that are also very interesting. And you have that same sort of phenomenon in Phoenix. So you look at it and you say, this is explained. And that's the other thing we run into with UFO phenomena. If some of the sightings are explained, people assume they're all explained. And we don't have that situation in Phoenix. We have some explanations for some, but we have some very good sightings that are inexplicable.
In your opinion, and based on what is in your book, The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover Ups, what do you believe to be the smoking gun when it comes to the existence and the reality of UFOs and DTs?
The best case, I think, took place in Levelland, Texas, on November 2nd, 1957. Because there were the multiple chains of evidence. The object interacted with the environment. It stalled car engines. It dimmed lights. It made radios fade out. There were witnesses at least 13 separate locations that saw the object. There were at least a half a dozen police officers involved. There is a report of a landing trace involved with this. Then just hours after this took place, an object is seen at White Sands Missile Range. I think it was White Sands Proving Ground at the time, but the White Sands Missile Range by 2 MPs. And 12 hours later, a second group of MPs saw a similar sort of thing. The Air Force wrote off the White Sands sightings, and I go into depth in the book, and I actually found one of the MPs who was involved in the sighting, so I was able to not only learn a little bit about what he had seen, but actually got a picture of the 4 guys who had been involved in the sightings. And what was interesting is you go through and you read this stuff. The Air Force investigated. They interviewed 3 of the 4 MPs, and they said, well, we didn't interview the 4th because he was on a 3-day pass. And I'm sitting here going, excuse me? A 3-day pass, you have a limited travel area, and you have to leave a contact number in case you have to be called back. What I think happened is one of the MPs was in the hospital.
Oh.
The information I've been able to tell that one of the MPs was in the hospital, and they didn't interview that guy because that opened another door they didn't want to go through. So 3 MPs were okay. They interviewed him, said, I think they explained it as Venus and the moon. And the one MP that I talked to, Glenn Toy, said no, it was down below the horizon. It landed about 100 yards from us. We got a really good look at it. So you've got that series of sightings from level land to the White Sands Missile Range. And I think if we, and when I say we, I mean the people investigating UFOs, what was the Air Force or Kehoe or any of those people, hadn't been so busy arguing about how many witnesses there were and what they saw and actually investigated the case, we'd be having a whole different investigation. One of the things happened was Kehoe said there were witnesses at 9 locations, or 9 witnesses to this thing, and the Air Force said we only found 3. And it turns out if you go through the Air Force files and everything else that's available, you find witnesses at 13 separate locations. The Air Force spent most of an afternoon investigating the sightings. They sent an NCO to talk to the people, and he came back and said, there was weather problems and there was all of this going on. It turned out not to be true. So when we look at that, the totality of those sightings, the White Sands end of it, the Levelland, Texas end of it. Levelland, by the way, is right by Lubbock, for those of you not familiar with Texas. It's not that far from Lubbock. I think that is a case that could have provided us with a lot of very good information about what UFOs were or what they're doing and that sort of thing. But we were busy arguing about that. And there's cases like that where there's the 2 camps arguing about the reality of the phenomenon and not actually trying to gather the data to see if there is something going on that should be taken. We should be taking a better look at it.
In your book, there's a chapter on injured by UFOs. You talk about November the 4th, 1957 in Brazil, February 28th, 1959 in Utah, Leon Minister in Massachusetts, Falcon Lake, Winnipeg, up here in Canada, Kerman, California, the Randlesham Forest in England. Now that's a biggie. That keeps on coming up in the news. It keeps coming up on television, on all the different reality shows pertaining to UFOs. What is your evidence, or what have you discovered about the Randlesham Forest?
I've had an opportunity to talk to a number of the people who are involved, John Burroughs and John Pennison, for example. And the interesting thing is, the reason it's in this section on people injured by it is because both Pennison and Burroughs say that their close approach to the object that landed in the woods was directly responsible for health issues that they experienced from that time. And just recently, Burroughs was was adjudicated to be 100% disabled because of his involvement in this event. But it took them years to get their, it took him years, Pennington and I, in the same way, to get their medical records because they had been classified. He said, well, why if there was nothing going on and it was just a lighthouse in the distance, would their records be classified? And it's because of the exposure to, and I say radiation, and I'm thinking of radiation in the most benign terms. A light bulb puts out light radiation.
Yes.
That sort of thing. So it's not the deadly gamma radiation that would kill you, but exposed to some level of radiation that caused various health problems. And so you have that. So these guys were injured because of the close approach to that. They didn't have the health problems prior to it, and after they approached the object, then the health issues began to manifest themselves. But in putting together that chapter, I had help from Chris Rukowski there in Canada.
Yeah.
I had help from friends in Brazil who provided me with additional information about the cases down there and what was going on down there. So I was able to gather information from a lot of places outside the United States because of the contacts I'd built up over the years of people around the world. So I dragged all that into the book, and there's some very interesting cases. There are some other cases where I think the one from Utah is very problematic, and it sounds to me as if the man who experienced it was either trying to get out of the military or had mental problems that manifested themselves. It really wasn't a UFO sighting per se, but there was other cases like the one in Canada where the man was burned by the UFO, and there's a picture in the book that Chris Rukowski sent me of the guy with the burn pattern on his abdomen. There was other physical evidence around it. There was a number of police officers, Canadian police officers, and military officers involved in the investigation. And here's another example of the Canadian Air Force sort of reacting poorly to the witness. And so there was a sort of a hostility between the witness and the military personnel that led to the military kind of concluding that there really wasn't anything to this. It was some kind of a hoax. But I think Chris has done a wonderful job of investigating the case and shared with me an awful lot of information, including documentation from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So there was some documentation that was very interesting and very helpful.
What does it tell you when a country like Canada is now saying, hey, listen, any UFO investigations are not going to be handled by any government agency?
I think they're attempting to avoid the problems that the U.S. Air Force found themselves in. And we had a sort of a similar situation here. I think that, and I'm not sure it was the Clinton administration, suggested maybe NASA should take a look at the UFOs, and NASA just said, no, we don't want a thing to do with that.
Yeah.
And it's because of the acrimonious atmosphere in which these investigations take place, and it's always that way. Rather than trying to gather the data, it's somebody trying to prove a point, and the points of view are so diametrically opposed that it becomes nasty at times. And I think that the reason the Canadian government doesn't want to do that, and the Australians have done the same thing. They don't want to get involved in this kind of activity that really does nothing to enhance their missions, but detracts from it. And there's no evidence that I have seen, and these things, I in the UFO government files propose that the phenomenon does not start with Kenneth Arnold in 1947, but goes back to World War II. But so we're looking at 70 years of UFO reports in what's called the modern era, and there's really no evidence of hostility. So there's no sense in them getting involved in this sort of thing because it doesn't relate to national security. It doesn't enhance their mission. There's no evidence that they're hostile. People have been injured, but it's more accidental by the person approaching the UFO as opposed to the UFO doing anything to them. So I think that the reason the governments don't want a thing to do with it is to avoid all those ancillary problems that are just unnecessary for them to complete their mission or what they see as their mission.
Exonation, Kevin Randle is my special guest. He's the author of a new book, a great book that it would be an asset to anyone who has a UFO library. The name of the book is The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracies, and Cover Ups. Kevin's website is kevinrandle.blogspot.com, and his book is also available on Amazon.com. Kevin, in your book, I've got to keep this short because we've got about 4 minutes left. One of the in the COMETA report section, you have a subsection called Counterexamples of Phenomena That Have Been Explained. Can you give us a couple of examples?
I missed part of that.
The topic is counterexamples of phenomena that have been explained.
And it's part of the Condon Committee report?
Yeah, it's part of the COMETA report. It's on page 309.
It's the French investigation of UFOs. There's been a lot of UFO sightings that are very, very puzzling in the beginning.
Right. And
what happens is when you look at all of the evidence, you come to a conclusion. I think one of the interesting things was is one of the phenomena we looked at is someone being chased by these spheres across the road. Mm-hmm. And when they looked at it, they discovered that there had been some kind of a traffic accident or a truck accident in the area that caused that sort of thing to happen. And it was sort of inexplicable until you got into the area and looked at what was going on. And in another case, they were seeing this blue-white UFO, and it turned out to be part of a short circuit in the electrical grid in a town. And once they got to the town and they followed it to the end, they were able to explain the sightings. So there are, and the point is, a lot of UFO sightings are explained by the mundane, by natural phenomenon or man-made phenomenon,
right?
Where what we were really looking for are those things that are inexplicable, that you cannot easily explain. And that was one of the other things they did. They looked at an awful lot of sightings that just clearly were inexplicable.
As always, Kevin, it's great talking to you, my friend. Congratulations on another book, another great book. What's next for you? What's your next book going to be?
Oh, I've been doing a couple of things here. I haven't got a plan in mind yet exactly what I want to do or what's going to be done here. I'm just kind of assembling information and ideas and see where we go next.
Sounds like a plan. As always, Kevin, thanks so much for coming on the show. And a special thank you and other members of the military who have served our countries with pride and integrity, maintaining our safety, our way of living, and the democratic way of life that we all enjoy. So thank you once again.
Well, thank you.
Exonation, Kevin Randle has been my guest this hour, www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. He's the author of a great new book, The UFO Dossier, 100 Years of Government Secrets, Conspiracy, and Cover Ups. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X-Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. This is the X-Zone, a place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard. Monday through Friday from 8 p.m. Eastern until midnight on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, the Starcom Radio Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. I'll be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.